Welcome to Innovator Café, the entrepreneur go-to, with your host, attorney Dave Stevens. Through each episode, Dave and his guests provide resources and assurances to build a company growth roadmap. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the website StevensLawGroup.com. Now here's the host of Innovator Café, Dave Stevens.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Innovator Cafe. Today we have a veteran innovator from Silicon Valley, Cal Lai. Welcome to Innovator Cafe, Cal.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate being here.
Yeah, you know, I've known Cal. I've known you for many years. We've worked on many projects together, and I'm really thrilled to have you on here. And you know, a lot of our audience are up and coming entrepreneurs, and even in-house people that dream about going off on their own or doing something innovative where they're at, right? So Let's talk a little bit about your background and how you became you're a serial entrepreneur in startups. I know we've talked about this as kind of being an affliction, but let's talk about why you're here and how you got here.
Great. Being an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship is definitely an affliction. I think it's something that those of us who are masochistic and feel that we need to suffer and struggle more than we already do are really drawn to. I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years. I started 4 companies over the course of that time. Had some good exits, been really successful at, really utilizing technology to create really compelling experiences, whether those are consumer experiences or B2B experiences. That's kind of the thesis of my career. I find what I like to do is I like to find opportunities in broken experiences where people have not great experiences, where I feel I can use technology to really up the level of the experience to create a joyful experience. So I think if you had to summarize the 4 companies that I built, they've all sort of fallen into that category. Now, the first company I built was a company that was very, very early in e-commerce. In fact, we were the first builders of a commercial e-commerce website. This is in 1993. The site was called egghead.com. It was the first time a true e-commerce site was built. Egghead was at the time the world's largest seller of software. So they had hired my company to essentially come along and build them a website. And I had this idea of, instead of just building a brochure site, that we could take their catalog of products and essentially put that online and sell products online.
That was very innovative in 1993.
It was absolutely insane. And people told me I was insane. And what's funny is the biggest objection I would get when we talked about, creating an e-commerce website was people would say, "Oh, Cal, nobody's ever going to put their credit card online, and because it's not secure." And if you think about that statement, if you talk to people at Match.com and Travis Kalanick at Uber, they would all tell you the Match.com story was everyone would say nobody would ever date anybody and meet online. And now 70% of all relationships start online. And Incredible. If you talk to the Uber team, they would tell you the first things they heard was nobody's ever going to get in a car with a stranger, because we're taught from the time we're toddlers, never get in a car with a stranger. Now here you are getting in a car with a stranger. So right. When I started an e-commerce site, people would say, "Cal, nobody's ever going to do this because nobody ever put their credit card online." So
no trouble.
30% of our retail sales today, and growing, are online sales. So we all know those sacred cows out there really aren't true. And I think, as an innovator, what you really got to think about is you hear a lot of these sacred cows, and I think most people who aren't innovation oriented accept them for truth, right? But people like me and those of us who innovate are really far more interested in questioning that. I have a statement, I make it to my teams all the time. And I think it keeps me at the edge of innovation, where I always say to myself, and I say to my team, rethink everything you know every day. Because if you think about it, what we know is a trap, and it really traps us into behaving the way we behaved in the past, rather than thinking about the way we should behave moving into the future.
So true. I mean, an innovator, you should never hear the first, like you ask them, "Can you do this?" The first answer should not be, "Nope, it's not possible." It should be a pause, right?
Yep. Exactly. And I think, if you think about companies, let's take something like Nokia. They were number one in the phone business. This is in 2005, and had a significant competitive advantage. And then Steve Jobs and Apple comes along in 2006, launches the iPhone, and they changed the entire view of a mobile device. They took it from voice and what at the time was rudimentary texting capabilities and very rudimentary internet access to now putting internet access, a computer in your hand, in your pocket. And that single switch, really, if you think about it, it really required really rethinking everything they knew every day. Because, in the old days, these devices were stuff that we talked to people on. And today, if you think about it, phone calls, I think 13th or 14th on the list of things people do. In fact, I always joke, if I get a phone call from my kids are all adults, right? So if I get a phone call from my kids, somebody died or something really bad happened, or they need money or something, because they never call me. They text me, they Slack me, they communicate with me through a messenger, but they don't ever call me. And I
called my kid the other day. He's 14. Is everything okay, Dad? That was his first response.
Yeah. I called one of my daughters the other day because I just wanted to say hi because she's pregnant and see how she's doing. So she picks up the phone and she says, "What's happening?" And I'm like, nothing. I called to say hello. And she's like,
it's as if you're showing and knocking on your door, like, well, oh my gosh, why are you here?
I know, exactly. So it's one of these, we have to get out of the paradigms that we're so familiar with. And I think those of us who are real innovators really know how to rethink everything we know every day. So, I've always asked myself, how can I do things differently? How can I do things better? How can I utilize technology to create better experiences? Which, if you think about it, requires that you rethink everything you know every day. That's the whole statement of nobody ever put their credit card online, or no one will ever date a stranger, or no one will ever get in a car with a stranger. It's one of those kinds of things, right? You have to rethink these alleged sacred cows that we have that really aren't. There aren't immutable laws of physics. They're just behaviors that have been so ingrained in us.
Yeah, the first question is why? When you say, no one would ever do that. Well, why would they never do that? Yeah. So if that's the case, how can we overcome that fear, that lack of trust? Right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. But what's interesting is I think most people accept the no's. They say, oh, nobody will put a credit card online. Say, yeah, that's going to be tough. Yeah, you're right. It won't happen.
Yeah, and they go back to work.
Yeah. And they go back to doing whatever they do. So I think those of us who innovate, it's imperative that we rethink everything we know every day, which means we got to question all the things that we assume to be truths, because these truths are really not that. They're essentially frameworks that have been established and adhered to over time, which great innovators and great technologists know how to break through those. Now, those are not easy to do because changing the way people behave based on their history of behavior is very difficult to do.
Sure.
And I think that's the key to being a great innovator. You've got to be able to bring people through that journey so that they really start to understand, oh, I see how this could be different. And if we did it that way, that would be a lot better experience. So I think that's kind of critical to understanding innovation. And I think technology is a great mover in that. I think we, as technologists, our job is to create opportunities for people to come with us on a new journey. That's a better journey. But in doing so, they've got to stop thinking about, well, I can't do that because of this, right? That's the way to think about it.
Well, it's a great segue into what I want to talk about next. And that is, thinking about, rather than go to a doctor or a veterinarian, right? Who would have thought you would ever just go online? I'm talking about a trust factor. Now you're talking about your own deep personal reservations and your habits and your health. And talk about Ask.Vet. It's you started a while ago, and it's really coming around now. How did you start improving that experience?
Yeah, I started AskVet in 2014, so it's been 10 years. In fact, we just celebrated our 10th birthday in January. And I've been a lifelong pet parent. I've had many, many pets. And any of you who own pets know that the veterinary experience can be an extremely frustrating one. The wait times are long. You don't know whether you see a symptom presentation, your dog is vomiting, it's scratching excessively, whatever that is, your cat's lethargic, whatever the behavior you see is. And of course, because we love and care about our pets, we're concerned. So our first reaction is to say, I got to go to the vet. Now, that's just the way we behave, because if you think about it, there was no other way to do this 10 years ago, right? You had to go in. Much like, I had to confront the same problem in 1993. Everybody said, well, you want to buy something, you got to go to the store. Who would go online and buy something? You just go to the store, right? That's a construct that's not real, but people believe it to be real, right? So in the veterinary industry has historically, since World War II, has been one where it's a transaction-based business where you go into the store, the veterinary hospital or clinic, and you get a service. They perform that service and they bill you for the service and you leave, right? That's the experience. So we're all very much trained to think, I see something wrong with my pet, I got to go to the vet. Or if you think about it, we're kind of the least capable people of making that triage decision because we're not medically trained professionals, certainly not with regard to our pets. And we love our pets like our family. So we're concerned. So it's a natural concern. And our first reaction is to say, got to go to the vet. And the veterinarian historically have said, you come in for me to perform the service. So I've always been frustrated by that because I don't know if I need to go into the vet. Most pet parents don't. We don't want to all run to the vet. One, because it's inconvenient. Two, because we know it's going to cost us money. We would love to have a resource that we would be put in front of us before we go to the vet that said, let me hear what your problems are. Let me see if this really requires a veterinary visit or not. The basic function called triage, right? That's the whole point.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I knew that triage function was missing in the veterinary space, missing in the human health space too, but let's not talk about that for now.
Right.
So as a pet parent, I said, boy, I wish I had some capability to talk to somebody, a trained medical professional, before I made the decision to go to the vet. They could help me, give me advice about whether or not I should go to the vet. So I created the very first telehealth platform in veterinary medicine in 2014, which really kind of revolutionized the industry because it gave pet parents a place to go to get that 24/7 instantaneous advice. So the Vet 24/7 platform in 2014 was a very robust technology platform where people could access us via text, email, chat, however people wanted to access our system. On a 24/7 basis, they're able to speak with one of our veterinarians or our veterinary technicians, and we would help you triage whether or not you go into the veterinarian or not. And if you were going to go, what you could expect, what was likely to happen, and what the symptom presentation you're seeing about. We've done 2 million of those chats since 2014, 2 million conversations with parents. And I can tell you, 80% of the time we talk to our pet parents and they give us symptom presentations, they do not need to go to the veterinarian because the problem is not necessarily medical, it's behavioral, it's nutrition. So what we've been able to do is really address that on-demand need of pet parents to say, do I need to go to the vet or not? And of course, they find that extremely valuable because if they don't need to go, they've saved some money, but more importantly, they don't have to inconvenience themselves or stress out their pets. Of course, in the 20% of the time they need to go, our team is the first people to say, no, this is a serious issue based on what you said. I think this needs a veterinary visit, maybe not today, but in the next few days, or this is an urgent veterinary visit, you got to go right now. So that's really what we do.
And there's the experience. So there's the experience improvement, right? So now you have an objective party who's not interested in bringing you in and making money, right? Correct. Because they're separate.
Correct. Right. That's right. Exactly. It's a third-party opinion, right? And there are a number of rules in most of the states called VCPR, veterinary client-patient relationship, which establishes the conditions under which you can create a true medical relationship, and wherein you can prognose, diagnose, prescribe, and treat. So we're prohibited from making diagnoses, but what we do is we provide triage and advice, and I think pet parents find it extremely valuable. So you're right. That is the improvement of the experience. So what we did over that time was we collected 2 million recorded conversations, terabytes of data that we have in our system. And and I always knew that the data that we were collecting was going to be extremely valuable, particularly as AI and large language models really started to evolve. So in 2017, I created a voice-based skill called my Pet Talk that was on both the Amazon Alexa platform and the Google Assistant platform. It was the most highly used and highly rated pet skill on both of those platforms. And people loved it. They'd come in, they could say, talk to Alexa and ask, my dog's vomiting, what should I do? And Alexa would answer the questions. My pet dog would answer the questions. The challenge with it was our doctor team had to script out all of those responses because even though we had the language data, we had to tell the system, if someone says this, it's if-then tree, right? If you go here, and if it's this answer, then go do this, right?
Right.
And that was very time consuming. So in 2019, we put that effort on hold, knowing that at some point generative AI would come along and essentially would create the logic for those scripts without human beings having to create that logic. Sure enough, we worked with OpenAI in 2021, 2022. We got an early SDK from them. And in the summer of 2022, we were able to stand up a very rudimentary version of VERA. VERA stands for Veterinary Engagement and Relationship Agent. She is our digital veterinarian. She's trained up on our 2 million conversations with pet parents. We've ingested the curricula from 8 veterinary colleges. We've ingested 180 data sets from throughout the veterinary industry. She is a fully trained veterinarian.
She's the C3PO of veterinarians.
She is.
Yeah.
And we've had hundreds of veterinarians. We launched her in April of last year. We've had hundreds of veterinarians test her and test her very hard because they're trying to put her through her paces, and she passes with flying colors. So what we've been able to do is use AI in combination with a unique and proprietary data set we have, 2 million conversations, and really created a very powerful, what we call digital professional that happens to be a veterinarian. And she can respond in a fashion and way that a professionally licensed veterinarian can respond. So again, the innovation there now is being able to take this a level further beyond just triage, but being able to provide advice. We've created a number of tools on this VERA technology platform for veterinary hospitals where they can put VERA at their front desk and she can answer the phone, she can triage, she can send you records, she can book appointments for you, she can help you remotely. And if you don't need to go in, she can say, you don't need to come in, do the following things and let's see what happens. And if you see the following, then call us back. Or she can say, no, this seems serious. Let's let you come in. Let me help you book an appointment. And the importance there is, there's a tremendous gap between supply and demand. There's far more animal health needs, both on the companion animal side, on the food production animal side, than there are veterinarians and technicians to support it. So what we're doing is we've created a veterinary bot that takes 70, 80% of that load off the human beings, because you can imagine that most of the questions that people ask are the same questions over and over again.
Sure they are.
Right?
Sure they are.
There are a lot of very common questions. So we can address those, take those off the table, and therefore really make available the in-person physical treatment rooms, make those available for the people who really need it, which will reduce the wait times for pet parents. It doesn't frustrate them as much. More importantly, for the veterinary practice, it allows them to rationalize the delivery of service so that they can charge a $10, $5 a month wellness fee to the people to ask their customers to access this, get the support when they need it. And if they need to come in, then they take advantage of the physical space that's available. Because right now, there's just not enough treatment rooms to support everybody. So if we can take some of those cases outside of the clinics, support them, resolve the problem, and then open up the clinic space for people who truly need an in-person visit, that does a lot for the veterinary practice in terms of revenues, margins, and profits. And for the pet parent, it really allows them to have a great experience because they can get their issues resolved most of the time without going to a vet. And when they need to go to a vet, we've now opened up that space so that they truly can get in at a reasonable time rather than having to wait 6 to 8 weeks. That's the average wait time in the U.S. today for someone to get
sick.
Unless they want to pay for a same-day emergency fee, which will essentially double the price of the visit.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. And also, we don't want to understate the value to the veterinarian, right? I mean, the relationship and the business practice too. So the relationship improves because you know what? They're heroes every day.
Yeah.
You don't show up and it's, I'll just take this and see if this works. I just paid $300 and I could have just not gone here. And they're not happy with their vet, right? Because they had no other choice. But if they go in there and it's serious and it resolves the problem, then, it's money well spent and it's the right experience, right?
Exactly.
As far as revenue goes, they're going to make more money off the more serious cases. I mean, nobody wants their dog, nobody wants this to happen to dogs, but it does happen. And if they get a number of serious cases, then they're a more profitable business and everybody's happy.
Absolutely. It's a win-win for everybody. Yeah. And it's a really good example of using technology, in this case, data and AI, to create a really joyous experience on both sides, as you point out, both for the pet parent and for the practitioners, right? So that's a really good example, I think, of how we need to rethink everything we know every day, because one of the challenges I had early on is veterinary practices have in their mind this construct that foot traffic equals revenue.
Sure.
And by the way, from World War II, when modern veterinary practice kind of became the thing, to 2000, that was largely true. You couldn't get a service in any other way.
Right.
You had to go in. And by the way, if you're a pet parent, you know this, 50% of the time when you call a veterinary hospital, nobody answers the phone because they're busy dealing with the people standing in front of them. The phone just rings.
Yep.
Maybe it gets a voicemail, maybe not. And we know that the ultimate stat is of 100% of the calls that go to a veterinary hospital, only 25% ever get responded to, because those calls don't get returned because people are busy in the practice. Or if they get returned, they get returned 2 or 3 days later and the issue is passed. And as the pet parent, you're already angry and frustrated because you weren't able to get the help when you needed it. So what we've done is we've used technology, data and AI, to really resolve their problems, because what we do is put a highly trained veterinary expertise, VERA, an AI data bot, in front of them, and that bot can answer the vast majority of their issues and help them remotely.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if they had a phone bank of people who were taking calls, that's just not feasible for a small practice.
Couldn't afford it. I mean, no, you're totally right. And if you had a phone bank, they would have to be medically trained people. We don't have enough veterinarians and technicians to support the current business. I mean, if you look at the companion animal side, between now and 2030, there'll be 25% more animals in this country than there are today. If you look at food production animals, there'll be 17% greater production between now and 2030. And if you look at the veterinary population, both of veterinarians and technicians, we're only growing that by 5% between now and 2030. So you have companion animal and food animal requirements rising dramatically, and veterinary availability, supply, staying fairly static.
Yep. That's not a good environment for the experience, is it? There needs to be some kind of innovation that makes it easier and faster, because you can't replace these humans.
That's right. And you can't even get them, because veterinary practice is the biggest. If you asked what their biggest challenge is, they would tell you it's hiring veterinarians. So and that problem has been really exacerbated since COVID, because more and more people have adopted pets since COVID. I think we're at the highest rate of household penetration of pets that we've ever seen in our history. So we historically were growing 4 or 5% a year in terms of pet ownership. If you look at the last 3 years, it's grown close to 9%. And that number is slowing down a little bit, but not much. And it's still way outseeding the available supply of veterinary expertise. So you're absolutely right. There's got to be some kind of technological intervention that really helps, mitigate this supply-demand imbalance. That's really the issue.
Right. Well, also, you've mentioned also in foreign countries, they don't have the veterinary networks like we do here. And yet the ownership in other countries is going up.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, the global trends are actually even worse than it is in the United States, because you're right. Historically, if you look at the Pacific Rim as an example, there wasn't a companion animal experience like there has been in the United States and in Europe. That's really changing. I think one of the things as Americans we can be proud of is that we export our pop culture really well. We do our movies, our music, our pop culture icons, and pet ownership is one of those issues that we've exported really well. So throughout the Pacific Rim, if you look at all the countries in Asia and Latin America, pet ownership is rising at an even faster rate than it is here. And they do not have the veterinary resources that we have or that Europe has, because they don't have a history of having companion animals. So it was never a requirement to train up a cadre of veterinarians. So they all value American and European veterinarians, because if you go to the, China or Japan or most of the countries throughout Asia, they don't have the trained supply of veterinarians that we do here and they do in Europe. So.
Right. And as they become more affluent, they can afford to have pets and things, right?
Yeah,
They're not
not to mention,
make
you're absolutely right. And as they become more affluent, one of the things, if you look at societies in general, they all want, as they become more affluent, is the consumption of protein, animal protein. So not only is the companion animal side growing in all of those, fast developing countries, but their food animal production side is growing too. And they don't have enough veterinarians to support either of those. That's really the issue.
That is a big problem.
It's a huge problem.
That's a big problem.
Huge problem.
And telehealth in pets can be a huge breakthrough. Just like 5G and other technologies, it just leapfrogs what they have, and they end up having, they start out with the best technology available.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think one of the things, speaking as an entrepreneur, one of the opportunities we all have is to be able to identify those places where we can utilize technology of any kind. And of course, that we can talk in more detail about AI and data, which you probably want to get into. But
Sure.
We can use some of these modern technologies to really accelerate the shift in paradigms. And that's really what I think is critical to innovation going forward. And, we live in a world where it can be very unsettling because the rate of change and innovation is accelerating. So change is happening so quickly. And you see it everywhere. You see it in every industry. You see it in the development of base technologies like,
Sure.
OpenAI's ChatGPT, Lai, in machine learning. You see it in neural networks. You see it in a lot of places. You see it in robotics, where there are a number of us who are really working to create better experiences by utilizing AI data and technology to not necessarily replace, although that's part of it, but more to enhance the human experience and the human capability. So.
Yeah, and the interface really is that interface of trust. People are frightened to death of the robots coming, right? So in your environment, they're holding their pets, right? Yeah. They're not going to trust. They're not going to, trust some mechanical, faceless, humanless thing. They need something that will reach out to them and give them comfort before they get treatment for their animals, just like they would their kids or their family, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a very delicate thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that we're fairly cynical about the use of bots is we all have that terrible experience, many of them, I'm sure, where we call our bank or we call the cable company or we get on an e-commerce website and they have a chat bot function, you get on the phone with your bank and you try to have a conversation and you realize the bot is really dumb. It can't ask. It doesn't understand what you say most of the time. It gives you stupid answers or irrelevant answers or can't answer your question at all. And I think we all have that. Press 1 to, and of course we all go 0, 0, 0. Get me to an operator. I don't want to talk to these stupid bots.
Right.
And one of the things that we built with VERA was because she has recorded conversations, she actually speaks in a very natural language because it's based on 2 million responses from our human beings, right?
Right.
So her language capability is she has emotional component because we built a module called Tone that sits on top of, we have a middleware there that sits on top of the core AI platform and LLM platform that allows her to really speak sympathetically. The experience is so good when people utilize VERA and talk to a bot. Half of the people, even though we disclose the fact you're talking to a bot, half the people by the end of the conversation actually forget they're talking to a bot. And we know that based on what their responses are. So they say things to VERA like, "Oh, you're a godsend. I really appreciate you. Having someone like you here for me has made all the difference. You've made me feel so much better." Something you would say to a human being, not you'd say to a bot.
Right.
The experience is so natural that people forget they're talking to a bot.
They would give them a recommendation to give their boss.
Yeah, we see it we hear it all the time. And our team we laugh about it because we're not trying to deceive anybody. We're trying to tell you that you're talking to a bot. But people get so involved in the conversation, and the conversation is so natural that they just forget. So one funny story I'll tell you is we had someone come in and their pet was end stage of life as an elderly pet, had been suffering for a while. And the pet actually, she came on and up talking to Vera about some issue she was seeing. And Vera was asking her questions. One of the things, because we have all these conversations, is Vera is not only able to provide you answers, we call her the answer engine, but she can actually ask you questions to essentially create more clarifying questions that really get to a very precise, very relevant answer to your given situation.
Sure.
In medical terms, that's called a differential diagnosis, right? And lawyers do that, consultants do that, doctors do that, veterinarians do that. So this person came in, so she was responding. The pet happened to pass away on the call. And the person, the pet parent said, "Oh my God, my pet just died. I saw her last breath. Oh my God, I'm so upset." And Vera said, "I'm so sorry." She responded in a very human way.
Oh my gosh.
The person started crying, and Vera says, "Oh, I know how you feel. Is there someone you can reach out to?" She spoke to her as though she were a human counselor, trying to counsel her, a grief counselor. And by the way, in our history of our 2 million chats, we've had a number of situations like that where we've actually had, for many years, grief counselors and the life counselors on our network to be able to respond to these kinds of issues. So Vera knows how to speak in that tone because she has history of that, right? And
fascinating.
This person at the end said, "You made me feel so much better. Thank you for being here for me. I couldn't have talked to anybody else that would have made me feel this good. I know that." And she said things like, "Oh, your pet had a long life with you." That I forget, the dog was like 16 or 17, which is elderly for a dog. Oh. What a great life the dog's had. You got to think about the great memories you've had. She's no longer suffering. And the pet parent said, "You're so right. I have to think about it that way. And even though it's sad, I knew this day was coming. Thank you so much for being here for me." And we read that, we're reading the transcript, and we're like, "My God, this is..."
You must have been choking up. It was so real.
No, a couple of our veterinarians actually teared up. It was such a real human conversation. That was a conversation with a bot.
And we're talking about experiences. That is the ultimate life and death experience and comfort that you're providing through AI.
Through AI. That's right.
Wow. That's right. That is fascinating. Just fascinating.
Yeah.
And you didn't plan it that way. I mean, it just happened.
No, it happened. Well, and we know that she has the capability to be empathetic, because if you think about, bad things are happening often. That's why people reach out to us. So our veterinarians, when they were responded in a very human, sympathetic way. So all of that capability, that emotion can be replicated through data and AI with Vera, because she has a basis for these conversations. That's the critical part, right? So
I'm floored. What a story, Cal. That is really, really incredible. The ultimate human experience.
The ultimate human experience. That's right. And and I think a lot of people, when I first started this AI move in 2017, 18, a lot of people said, this is never going to work, because the bot will never, ever be intelligent enough to react and respond in a way that pet parents would want them to. And I thought about that, and I said, yeah, that's possible, but we don't know that, because we know that she's ingested a lot of these emotional conversations. Let's see if the LLM can actually pick up and replicate that tone. I'm here to tell you, she's really good at it, and she has been able to pick up, replicate that tone. And it's so well done that most pet parents lose sight of the fact that they're not talking to a person.
Isn't that something? Next step is singularity, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. And one of the interesting things that we found in our own research, and we also know it from talking to other people in the telehealth space, is if you talk to some of the people who provide, counseling services, they ask their users, would you rather talk to a live therapist or a bot therapist? And 65% of the response from one of the companies that I spoke with was they'd rather talk to a bot. So the company was really shocked that, wait a minute, you'd rather talk to a bot and do your therapy with a bot than a human? They asked them why. And the answer was, because I don't feel that I'm being judged. So I can be honest because a person isn't judging me on the other side. When we ask our pet parents, we ask them the same question in a survey we did about a year ago when we first launched this. Would you rather talk to a human being, a doctor, a real veterinarian, or would you rather talk to a medically trained veterinary bot? We had the same sense. 65, 70% of the respondents said, I'd rather talk to a bot. We asked them why. And they said, because whenever I go to my veterinarian, I'm always feeling that I'm being judged and that they're thinking I'm not a good pet parent because I didn't do this, or I should have seen this, or I should have done the dental, or whatever it is. And they're made to feel guilty because they feel they're being judged, even though veterinarians are trained not to make those judgments. They're human beings and it comes across. And if nothing else, the pet parent interprets whatever they say as a judgment. So they'd rather talk to a bot because they know they're not being judged.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's
where the trust factor is high from a bot, higher than it is for an actual human being.
Because the bot's not judging you.
Wow, that is so shocking. That's incredible.
It's shocking. And I can say from seeing a lot of the real live conversations that occur with VERA, it's absolutely true. And people say things to VERA that you would not say to a human being.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not being judged and you really want those answers, there you are.
You're absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
Wow, incredible, Cal. Boy, the things you've pulled off. That is just amazing what this has accomplished. So how about a word to our entrepreneurs wrapping up? You know, what is your advice to an up-and-coming entrepreneur who's looking to step out on their own, or if they're, you know, in a position they want to make a bigger difference in their company, they want to innovate? What's your advice to them?
Yeah, I mean, I spent my whole adult life as an entrepreneur. And I have to say the journey is one of great joy and great pain all at the same time.
Right.
And, you know, and as a result, one of my ways, and I've been very successful at doing this, fortunately, and one of my ways of paying back is I coach and train a lot of young entrepreneurs. And I get asked that question a lot, you know, what's my advice? And my advice is that you always got to be rethinking everything you know every day, and don't ever take anything you hear as fact. There are very few things that need to abide by the law of physics. Most of it is constraints that have been imposed upon us by the way we think and our past behaviors. They're not actually rules of physics that prevent this stuff. So I think the way I describe entrepreneurship is I get up every morning. It'd be like getting up every morning, saying to myself when I get up and sit on the side of the bed, I'm going to run into that wall and burst through that wall. So you get up and you run as fast as you can and you slam your head into a wall. And of course, that hurts, right? And you're like, God, that hurt. I didn't even make a dent in that stupid wall. And then the next morning you get up, you say, you know, I'm going to try it a little differently. Maybe if I spring off the bed, I'll have more momentum and I can make it. So you try that and you go, bam, right into the wall. And you're like, ow, that hurt. That didn't work. So the next morning you get up and you say, maybe if I put a helmet on, I can use my head and spring off the bed, right? So, you know, it's one of those things where the ability, the mental flexibility to say, okay, that didn't work. Here's what I can do next to try to get it to work. You know, it's the whole invention of the light bulb, right?
Right.
The incandescent light bulb. I didn't fail 1,100 times or 1,200 times. I found 1,100 ways not to do something, right? You know, and Edison was right. I mean, it's exactly the way it is. So, you know, you have to have tremendous persistence. You can't take no as an answer, and you got to be willing to endure a lot of trial, pain, suffering to get through it. And if you keep at it, I think if people ask me all the time, what's the most important characteristics for a successful entrepreneur? Right. Number one is persistence. You got to be willing to just run at it till the day comes when you finally are able to break through the wall. And by the way, if you tried that often enough and you kept at it, you would find a way to punch through that wall. It may take years. It may hurt a whole lot. You may have a lot of broken bones in the process, and everybody might think that you're nuts, but you've broken through it. And that's a big deal, right? So persistence is number one, and you got to be always willing to not accept what you believe to be the truth as truth.
Right.
Rethink everything you know every day. And if you approach it from that perspective, I think you'll find the entrepreneurial journey a really rewarding and profitable. And as you said to me earlier, it's an affliction. It totally is an affliction. I'm a glutton for punishment, obviously. And I think, as an entrepreneur, you cannot not be a glutton for punishment, because
Right.
It's like baseball, right? If we bat 300, we're in the Hall of Fame. Well, that means you struck out, or you hit the ball out 7 out of 10 times. That's painful, right?
Yep. You can't walk away from every one of those with a long face and give up. You realize it's part of the game.
And most people do, right? It's hard for people to accept failure as a part of the process, because if you think about most of us, right, we go to school, we do well in school, we succeed at doing well, we get great grades, we go to grad school, we succeed at that too. Well,
Right.
in a way, that's all within our control. When you get out into the world and you start to tackle big problems, there are a lot of factors that are not in your control. Right?
It's totally chaotic. Yeah.
Totally chaotic. And you got to have the guts and the chutzpah and the persistence to keep running at it until you break through the wall. That's the reality.
And that's what great coaches do. The career coaches, baseball coaches. I always hear my kids' little league coach saying, next play, move on to the next play. You don't sit there and dwell on the ball you just missed, or, the swing that you missed, right? Because you're bound to be successful, and it's a team effort, right?
Yeah. And you take away whatever lesson, right? You take away the lesson of, okay, well, I'm not going to swing at it this way next time. I'm chopping down on the ball. I need to swing across it more.
Yep.
Whatever lesson you take away, you got to take that away, and then shed the emotional baggage of the failure and just move on to the future. Right? That's the way it works.
Right. Excellent advice. Cal, thank you so much. Really great having you here on Innovator Café, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed the time, Dave. It was a real pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Take care.
You too.
You've been tuning into Innovator Café, the entrepreneur go-to, with your host, attorney Dave Stevens. You can find more episodes on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the website StevensLawGroup.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.